Hi and welcome to the channel. Today we're doing something new where I read something and give my honest opinions about it. And my first ever book in a reading vlog is going to be the new Millie Bobby Brown book. And that is called 19 Steps. I haven't started this book yet, but I heard about it when she first announced it. And to be honest with you, I expected nothing. I am a writer as well, and I have written 2 books that are still in the works of editing, but I wouldn't publish them, and we're the same age. And seeing that Millie didn't have any particular interest in writing before, at least as far as I know, I'm not a diehard fan of hers, I expected nothing, just pure old nothing, because I had no idea if it was going to be a ghostwriter or a actual debut novel, just with, editing. And so here's the blurb. Love blooms in the darkest days. It's 1942, and London remains under constant threat of enemy attack as the Second World War rages on. In the Bethnal Green neighborhood, Nellie Morris counts every day, lucky that she emerges from the underground shelters unharmed, her loving family still surrounding her. 3 years into the war, she's grateful to hold on to remnants of normalcy. Her job is assisting the mayor, and nights spent at the local pub with her best friend. But after Chan's encounter with Ray, an American airman stationed nearby, Nellie becomes enchanted with the idea of a broader world. Just when Nellie begins to embrace an exciting new life at Ray, a terrible incident occurs during an air raid one evening, and the consequences are catastrophic. As the truth about that night is revealed, Nellie's world is torn apart. When it seems all hope is lost, Nellie finds that, against all odds, love and happiness can triumph. 19 Steps is a deep, affecting, mesmerizing page turner inspired by the author's family history. An epic story of longing, loss, and secrets. Millie Bobby Brown's propulsive debut introduces an unforgettable, brave young woman and boldly portrays the strength and the power of love. Emmy-nominated actress and producer Millie Bobby Brown's debut novel, 19 Steps, is a moving tale of love, longing, and loss, inspired by the true events of her family's experience in World War II. Quotes. Inspired by my nanny Ruth, this book is very personal and close to my heart. I grew up listening to stories about her time in the Third War. I'm honored to keep her story alive. End quote. Millie Bobby Brown. I now know that there was a ghostwriter, and she apparently gave her the ideas and things and plot points, and she was researching with her family as well, and sending them over to the ghostwriter, and she wrote it and they edited it, whatever. So having a ghostwriter, it does kind of give me some expectations, but I'm still expecting nothing pretty much, because I'd rather be pleasantly surprised. I'm reading this off of Goodreads, and I don't know, it's a bit, I feel like it's really dancing around a plot, but not giving us anything. The author is actually mentioned, so is it a ghostwriter or not? It's kind of missing the point of ghostwriting if you think about it, but I see that she's written a bunch of books. She's written 19 books, counting 19 Steps. You'd assume that writing 19 books would make you write really well, but again, I don't know, I'm expecting nothing, and I don't know if it's my reader self trying to keep hopes as low as possible so that I'm actually surprised and I like the book, or that I'm actually expecting something really bad to happen. Still confused about how and why the author is mentioned, but it's a ghostwriter, and on the book you only see Millie's name, and it's actually written so huge. It's almost bigger than the title. It's kind of interesting, but anyway, this book is 370 pages, I think. I have a conference to attend this evening, and it takes me an hour and 20 minutes or so to get there. So I decided, why not read this book while I'm going there? it is the evening of the same day and I'm exhausted and drained, but I just want to really quickly give an update. I read 26 pages, and this is so unusual for me because I've been reading like 2 hours almost, 1.5 or 2 hours, and normally that means like at least 50 pages, but I read like 26, and I think there is a reason for that. This book is so full of clutter, at least as a like first impression. I already have 14 highlights in 26 pages. Okay, let's go in order. There's a prologue, right? And there it's the main character Nellie, which is awfully similar to Millie, but who am I to say that? It's like 1992 or 1993 or something, and she's going back to this like train station thing, and it's like trying to get you invested, as a book should, but it's not working because it's like her breath was coming in short, urgent gasps, her heart was racing furiously, and she knew it wasn't due to the exertion of climbing the stairs. It was because of what happened here 50 years ago. And it's just like, I'm not invested. If it wasn't this 50 years ago, something happened here and it's so mysterious and you're gonna be invested. But it said exact moment that whatever thing happened, then I would be personally more invested, and I think most readers will be more invested as well. But they didn't do that, and it's just like very dry. It was because of what had happened here 50 years ago, and I'm like, okay, I guess the train was late, maybe, I don't know. And after that, it's like the night that changed her life forever. Clutching her suitcase with one hand and her chest with the other, she cowered against the wall, fighting to regain control, struggling to catch her breath. Don't fall, she whispered. I think, like, it's not bad, but instead she could have written just don't fall in italics and no, like, she whispered, because that's more of a like inner thought thing, right? So like you could say don't fall in italics, and you could repeat that in this moment where the accident happened. As a text and as a novel, this is so cluttered. I can't, like, it looks like a first draft that you try to put as much detail as possible in, but it's not actually details, it's just repeating the same thing over and over. It's like, okay, the first page in chapter 1 is just describing weather, but again, it's just saying the same thing over and over and over. Oh, she wanted to taste how life felt before the war. And I was actually thinking how, while reading this, how they could have said like something about dust and something about ruins, you know, like not just, oh, it was hot, just like summer, but it's fall. And here's the funniest thing that I've highlighted, I think. Here, I'm reading it for you word by word, okay? It was hot. The kind of heat that makes you yearn for the weather to cool down and the leaves to fall, but then you berate yourself for wishing away the good weather. Like, there's so many different ways to say this, but she chose this, whether Millie or what's her name, Kathleen. And here, as you can see, it's like up until here, and that's way too much to talk about the weather in this dry way. Like, it's just the same thing. Again, there's so much repeating and there's so much saying and telling, and it's just like, okay. Another example, her little sister, only 7 years old, could barely remember a time before the war began, right? This shows us that she's already, you know, she's 7 years old, she was this much years old before it started, and now she obviously doesn't remember much of a life before the war, right? But no, they keep going on, and it showed no signs of ending anytime soon. As much as the war had marred Flo's childhood, it had robbed Nellie of her teenage years. Also, teenage years! I know for a fact that being a teenager and having teenage years and, you know, being in your teenage years and having this like careless teenage dream happened after the Second World War. Just typing it on Google would take 2 seconds, but they didn't do that, and that shows me just how little care they put into the writing style itself. There's so much love for Churchill here. It's just like, they were still here, still fighting, and will never surrender, as the Prime Minister had said near the start of the war. Never surrender. Nellie jutted out her chin defiantly as she remembered Mr. Churchill's speech. And I think this is like this very superficially badass nationalist thing, and I think, like, how it seems to be a bit black and white, but maybe they're going to change it and maybe they're going to add some nuance. Also, remember how when we read on Goodreads, it said that she meets this random American guy and then she wants to explore the world? No, that is a lie. That is a blatant lie, because they keep, like, everyone, her parents, her aunt, her uncle, her friends, everyone is repeating how Nellie is not for this world, in a corner of London, and how she's going to leave and explore and she's going to see more of the world. And why would you lie? Why would you lie? Also, there's this random paragraph at the end of chapter 1 where it's like, it was always like this: family and friends sharing what they had, making the best of things, appreciating little kindnesses from each other. One day things will change and they'd be back to how things were before the war, when they didn't have much, but there was always enough of everything to go around. This is so out of place. Like, you already showed me, right? You already showed me that this is happening. This is not a paragraph of reflection from Nellie's perspective or anyone else's perspective. It's just a random paragraph. And this, like, foreshadowing, but it's not working because they're talking more about the past being the future, but, like, it's not working. This whole book, as far as I've read, feels like a whole story that I would have heard from my neighbor who heard from their friend's neighbor. You know, like, reading that it's Millie's grandma's or something story. It's just like, is it this devoid of emotion? It's such a pace that is so slow, but it thinks it's really fast. So there's so much contradiction going on, and I do not like it. And I think that is the reason why I've been taking so long finishing 26 pages, because I realized I was getting distracted every 5 seconds. So I'm gonna read as much as I can and update whenever I have something to say. Okay, hi. I did finish the book. Surprising, I know. It took me a while, but I did finish the book. Before I get into the entire, like, book review as a whole, I just want to talk a bit about my thoughts and feelings at the, like, 65% mark. I did take my notes as a little voice memo and use that to actually talk about that now. So that was when I started, I think, chapter 33. And let's just talk about Nellie for a second. Nellie and the love interest finally meet between those, like, pages that I read, and actually it was as I expected, but it wasn't as good as it should be. The love interest's name is Ray, which is, like, kind of a mediocre name, but I'll accept it. So let's quickly do a recap. Pretty much nothing happens until this page, except that 2 family members die, and after that, war is getting worse and worse again. Nellie's parents say, let's send the kid, Flo, to the countryside, whatever. So they put the kid in the bus. And then Em is thinking to herself, oh no, I cannot lose my child because I just don't want to be apart. So Nellie takes it upon herself to run after the bus, to stop the bus and take the kid back. But then Ray is there, like, saving her life, whatever. Ray is acting a bit odd, in my opinion, saying things like, oh my god, why are you running after a bus? That's kind of weird girl behavior. And Nellie obviously says, who are you to comment on what I'm doing? And then we get these thoughts from Ray about Nellie. She was not at all like the girls back home, or those straight-laced girls from the ATS. He says this after he saves her life and she doesn't say thank you. And I thought, like, wow, this is enough to be a rebellious kind, isn't it? And then he says, this girl, with her obvious love for her little sister, her spirit, her unconventionality, her disregard for danger, now she was different, all right. An enigma. He's just admiring her. I think it's, like, a bit delusional to see this random girl in distress and then take it as a like, oh my god, she loves me and I love her kind of thing. In different instances, they mention about her beauty and how she just doesn't know because there are no mirrors at her home. And although they keep telling me that she doesn't know how beautiful and how mesmerizing and how amazing she is, she acts in a way that shows that she is actually very aware of it. And I just want to remind you that the descriptions of Nellie in this book are generous mouth, um, wide brown eyes, brown hair. Kind of looks like someone to me, but I don't know. She was naturally beautiful, yet she seemed totally unaware of the fact. I don't know where we get the information that Nellie loves singing and is amazing at it. And I thought it's a bit odd if she has that good of a voice. Why is she not pursuing that? And also, her profession is a bit odd because she's assistant to the mayor, and I don't know if that's like, weren't there any requirements because she's just an 18-year-old girl who just knows how to type? Maybe that's enough, but I don't know. And I think that character placement was just to make the story work and make the plot work, and not in terms of does it make sense. And I have actually better ideas about this. Also, Ray thinks things like, but they were grown women who could make their own decisions. And I was like, feminist king. What a feminist king. So, putting Nellie aside, it took 150 pages to get to the actual accident, and I thought that the accident was written super well. Let's just talk about the accident really quickly. So, Bethnal Green accident is in the tube. There's only one entrance. This was an actual disaster in London, and there was actually one entrance, and it was narrow, dark, slippery. There was nothing to hold on to, so people did try to get it done in a way that it would be less dangerous, obviously, because people were rushing during any kind of like sirens, but then they didn't get any kind of funding for it. And one day when people try to go in, one woman just falls, and so people just keep falling onto each other, and it's just bodies crushing on the stairwell. Apparently those were the 19 steps that the book title comes from. Millie says that her grandma, I think it was Ruth, that actually lived through that. But let's just quickly think about it a second. Millie's parents were born in 67 and 68. So around that time, the accident happens 43. So 24, 25 years in between. I don't know about this as a sure thing, but I've seen in some places that her grandma was 4 years old when this happened, and she survived it, and she didn't lose anyone in it. Along with this will make sense with the timeline of both of Millie's parents being born 67 and 68. So her grandma would be born around 38, 39, and I think it was Grandma Ruth, and she died in 2020. So it would make sense in terms of age and timeline, but if that is so, it's a bit odd that she would have an emotional connection to it. In any way, this was written super well, I think, both in terms of Billy's point of view and Ray's point of view, and the entire like description of everything that happens, especially Billy has an asthma attack during it, trying to save people. I thought like they really did convey everything they could during those few scenes. But then it just goes downhill again. I was only impressed once before this by the writing, and that was about the mom thinking about the youngest child, Flo. Although there are things like these two instances where I was like, yeah, this is actually going super well. There are instances where they spell gorgeous with like 3 R's, and no, like someone screaming no with 3 O's. And I found it very odd because if you had enough imagery and description in these like instances, you wouldn't need to put like extra O's and like extra exclamation marks because this is fiction. And yeah, I don't see how this works. At the same time, they say things such as like drop dead gorgeous. I'm just thinking as a reader like, you could have fixed that. You could have just asked Google very quickly, but they didn't. The entire like writing before the accident was complete like fluff and extremely dull. Like the only happenings before the accident are Millie's uncle and aunt die, and then they're trying to send Flo away, but then they don't, and then she meets Ray and she says hi to Ray and they go on dates, and it was not convincing at all, their connection, although they try really hard to let us think that they do have a connection. And that's it pretty much, and then the accident happens. That's the writing. It's very like dull, very uninteresting, and so that's one of the reasons why it took me so long to get through this book, because it's both easy to read, because even if you skip every other sentence, you get everything that you need to know. But that also makes it extremely exhausting to read and underwhelming, because you just keep reading and reading and reading and nothing is happening. So one of my biggest issues in terms of characters and plot is the character of Amelia. She's a side character that is friends with Nellie and her friend Barbara, I think. Yeah, that's her name, Barbara. Amelia is a big problem, and the reason for this is that she is an unwed, single, pregnant teenager. She has this lover, I forgot his name. He dies and she's left all alone, but then she was pregnant. They were going to marry, but like they couldn't because he died. All that stuff. But the thing is that people's attitude were odd. This is 1943, right? And only one instance of bad behavior happens where Amelia gets called like annoying or something like that, and Billy stands up for her, and that's it. Nowhere else does Amelia get any kind of bad treatment because of her situation. However, this is 1943, and even in 2023, just scroll TikTok, you will find a single mom that just gets attacked by random people on the internet for being a single mom. And usually they get filthy, disgusting things said to them. In 1943, which is 80 whole years ago, I don't think people would be that sympathetic towards her as a single mom. The main thing here is that Nellie and her friend are 18 and they are single as well. However, their parents are super supportive, but I think a more reasonable plot point would be that Nellie gets told by her parents that Amelia is a filthy, bad person and they shouldn't talk to her again. And Nellie could have villainized her in her head, thinking, yeah, like this was completely inappropriate. I shouldn't talk to her because it's a whole dangerous thing. And what if I do the same, all that kind of stuff. And we could have seen these people, Nellie and her parents, being threatened by the idea, and how Nellie's parents just think it's like a bad thing that Amelia could convince maybe their children of. But then maybe we could have seen that Amelia is so isolated from everyone because no one wants to talk to a single mom. But then maybe after a year or something, Nellie would have seen Amelia and her child and thought wow, we did so wrong and she's so alone. And maybe Amelia could have married someone that she really doesn't want to marry to cover it up and have a place in society. But there was none of that. It was just parents being super supportive, everyone being super supportive, except one person calls her annoying or something like that. There is no commentary on anything at all. And that brings me to many instances in this book where people keep repeating that everyone was so much, more selfless and sharing everything that they had with each other during the war. However, I don't think that is completely true, and saying that makes it look like you're trying to make it we are super good people point, if you know what I mean. One of my favorite books ever, and one that really discusses World War II and its effects super well, is Mouse. And in there, you see that people were fighting for their lives and just claiming that we were just, a bit poor because of the war and, sad, but we shared everything. We had so little, but we shared it with everyone. That's a bit odd. I could have seen both of these things happen simultaneously and think, oh, so war had these two different effects on people. But no, it's just like, we are so good and we are so selfless and we are such a good community. And I think that's like a bit disingenuous. And thinking again about 1943, there's another thing that is a bit odd, and that's how Nellie keeps calling places exotic. Just like anything about the world, she calls them exotic. Like, there's this extreme duality when some things are accurate, but some things are just absolutely not. And it just creates this unrealistic fantasy world that makes zero sense. And again, we see no growth whatsoever. The book made me gasp once, and I just want to talk about it a bit because it's very, very odd. So I'm assuming people knew that people were dying in World War II, but this is not in the book at all. Like, they never mention it. Nellie herself, the main POV, she never mentions it. But then she's showing Ray around. She's mainly talking about the King's Guard, okay? And so Ray says, we don't have anything like that in the States. You have so much tradition here. And Millie drops this gem, which is, yes, and that's why we're fighting to save it from Hitler. So I think, number one, Hitler doesn't want your culture. Hitler had no interest in British culture, number one. Number two, I think when we think about stealing cultures, Britain can be the main villain that comes to everybody's mind. Have you seen British museums? Is my question. And obviously, every place has culture in some ways. But saying that Hitler is after your culture is very, very odd. Not only because Hitler couldn't care less about your culture, but also because people are dying, Nellie. People are dying. There's no mention of Jews in this book at all. And we never see, like, I would have liked to see Nellie think, wow, we are losing so many people. I cannot imagine these other people who are dying. No, not at all. Like, no empathy. But then the book is trying to tell us that Nellie is so selfless and she loves everyone and she cares for everyone. But we see no empathy. It's just like us versus them. And there is no growth whatsoever. So Nellie starts the book off with very like nationalist and black and white thoughts, where she's thinking about Churchill and how much she loves him and like how they're never gonna surrender, which is like good spirit. But the issue is that the whole point of this book is the accident, right? And the accident happened why? Not because of bombs and not because of the panic, really, but it was because Britain, the country that she loves so much, did not want to spend money on their people. So I'm thinking, if we saw Nellie thinking, I love my country, we're never gonna surrender, to then realize, I lost my family. Oh my god, yeah, she loses her family in that. She loses her dad and Flo in that accident. I cannot believe I didn't mention this yet. But she loses them. And this does not shape any new kind of belief in her. And, thinking about it, she could have thought, I love my country so much, but we didn't die because of Hitler. Like 173 people did not die because of Hitler's direct actions, but because my country didn't think of protecting us. And that could have put at least like one drop of nuance to this, but there is none of that. And instead, we see Nellie barking at her family for not dying and Billy for having asthma and not being able to save her family, which is insane. Like, think about this huge thing, okay? An accident where 173 people died, 62 I think were wounded, and think about it like a pile of 300 people. Think about it. And think about how a person that is currently having an asthma attack is going to save everyone. It's impossible. She yells at her mom for dropping her purse and being behind, and she's yelling at her younger brother, who's like 13 at that point. It's just like her yelling at specific people, but never once thinking, the government, what did they do? Never once. Never once. And so this puts like a very pedestrian, very elementary kind of thinking where it's just like, we are good and you are bad. I'm good and everyone else is bad. Like she lashes out at every single person, and this is not how grief works, really. And I think someone in Nellie's position would have more guilt in herself than villainizing everyone else around her. In my notes here, I said that I don't know what we could talk about in the next 100 pages because there is nothing left. There was one plot point, one big plot point, and that was the accident, and then I don't know what's gonna happen. That was my thought. And I was right, because we read random fluff the entire rest of the book. Let's see what happens from then to the end of the book. So, there's a third act conflict. So in the plot, Ray is in the car and it backfires or something, and then there's a loud noise, and they suspect that that could be maybe the reason for how people get like in some panic, thinking that it was a new German thing that was going on, like a new weapon or something. So people panicked, and they were rushing, and so they fell onto each other and the accident happened. But Nellie is there as the assistant of the mayor, listening to all these testimonies, and then they realize that it was Ray that caused it. But then, just before the accident, Ray goes there to tell her that he's repositioned and cannot see her as often as they would like. So he's away, but then there's news that he's dead. He was shot, but they couldn't find the body, and he's dead, is what they assume. And so she's really sad, but then we skip 2 years. I think the time skip was a bit lazy writing because that's when most of the stuff happens, right? She lost her dad, her younger sister, her uncle, and aunt, like just a few months before that. And then she lost her boyfriend. So I would expect to see some kind of like stuff happening by that moment. But like 2 years, nothing happens. It's just a huge time skip and a bit of lazy writing, because then it's just like she got over it because it's been 2 years. And it's just like, sure. There's a whole plot point about the council and how they asked for money to fix the whole issue, but then they didn't get it. But then the government blames the council for not having done anything, but also the people for being careless. And then Nellie's mom goes on to sue the council, I think, because there's this journalist that lost his father as well, and he talks to Nellie about how they need to do something about it, and so they agree on suing the council because Nellie's mom lost two family members, and one of them was the husband, who is like the breadwinner, so they will get like compensation for it, and they do get compensation, but then it just gets dropped. But then we know that the council wasn't to blame, but there's a whole ordeal. We listen in to the mayor, but we find out nothing. And apparently they take the blame so that the government can pay, and there's nothing else happening about it. Like, it just gets dropped out of nowhere. We never like bring it up again. One of my biggest issues with this book is that it feels like a first draft or a detailed outline, because it's so dry, so dull. It says nothing, it adds nothing. It's very, very dry, and it's very obvious that no thought was put into this book. The story did not have time to marinate, and it's so obvious. It's like the first idea you would have of a story, but instead of letting it marinate and like letting it brew, they just wrote it out and published it. So Nellie is like working class, but it adds nothing to the story. So instead, maybe her father could be a journalist, and instead in the accident they would lose the mom. And with all this thing, maybe her father will be more and more invested in the whole case, and that will make more sense in my opinion. um but who am I to say that? But also, the mayor is a woman, and I don't know how possible that was, especially thinking like World War II, when people were more like clear cut on how much authority is needed and stuff. So I'm not sure about that. Nellie's dad could also be the mayor, and so she would have like an already existent connection to the entire case and the plot. And that will make more sense than this story as of now. Remember how I said I didn't know if there was anything left to write about? I was right, because there's no plot in the rest of the book either. The whole thing is just romance. As I said, we think that Ray is dead, although it's very obviously not true. And I was thinking, like, we could have seen Nellie in delusion thinking they didn't find the body, so maybe he's alive, but there's none of that. She just says, like, okay, he's dead, let's just move on. And in those 2 years, somehow Nellie and Billy get closer because like he's there for her. And they grow closer, and it's kind of a romance, but it's not. Like, Nellie never likes him. It's just like we hug, but it's not like Ray. She keeps like reminding of us that Ray was a better option. And I don't know, I felt like she could have been more convinced of this than that. Or maybe at first she would say it reminded her of Ray, but then with a bit of time, like in different scenes, it could have been lessened and lessened, and she could just start to think Billy's a great option, he's amazing, and all of that stuff without bringing Ray up. But they do every single time. And that just reminds me that he's not endgame. Billy, he's just not endgame. And just 2 days before Billy and Nellie's wedding, Ray shows up, and Nellie says, I cannot let Billy down, so I'm gonna marry him. But then on the wedding day, Ray shows up again, which I found was a bit weird, because 2 days ago he said, if you don't want me anymore, I can leave. I understand, like, I'm gonna leave and never come back. And they agree, and then he comes back. Billy, on the wedding day, literally waiting for her to like come out in her wedding dress, finds that she's talking to someone, and then he sees that it's Ray. And he goes there and he says, did you know? She says yes, like 2 days ago he first came and I realized that he's not dead. But then Billy's like, why didn't you tell me? And Nellie's answer is that, oh, it would make you sad or something like that. And he obviously understands that she still loves him and she wouldn't be happy in a marriage with Billy knowing that Ray's actually alive and they could, be married. And I completely understand. It just makes complete sense in this occasion. And he just says, like, leave me alone, like, go. Gives the honeymoon tickets to them and they get married, and then that's where the book ends. I felt bad for Billy because he is this like ornament that the authors use to just move the story forward. I do not really complain though, because this adds just 1 or 2 drops of investment into the book, because otherwise there's nothing happening. I just know that it could have ended after the accident, just a bit after the accident, and moved to present time. But then it would have been very short. And that's why I think the authors wanted to kind of stretch it a bit more so that it's a novel and not a novella. And I think that was not a good choice, in my opinion. They should have thickened the plot, and it's actually like astounding to me how they have World War II as a setting and still failed at doing this, because it's like World War II is just this like backdrop kind of thing in the entire book. And the accident could have been anything, like a car crash or something, and it would have been the same story, because again, there's no thoughts. It's just nothing, like no thoughts, head empty. It's just like we went this way and we did that and this happened and this happened and this happened and we did that and then I felt really bad. And there are random sentences like, war could be so cruel. When I read that sentence, I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point of war, but who am I to know? And it's just like, life was so cruel, and these kind of repetitions make me feel like I'm always going back to the same thing, like going in a circle and nothing's happening. There's no new thing going on, and it's just like dry writing. So let's just do a wrap up with the final like short review of the book. So, disclaimer, I do not hate Millie Bobby Brown. I think she's a great actress. This is the book review, not Millie Bobby Brown review. So let's just know that and put that aside first. The story had much bigger potential than this. The story needed more time to, again, as I said, marinate and get something out of, because, again, it's just like the idea of saying, oh, this is going to happen, and then I'm going to talk about the accident. It leaves no specific reason for me to think about the accident more than I did before. And that's because after the accident, it's just romance. It could have been that Nellie starts working for people who lost their families in the accident and trying to like help them out. And going on this storyline, she could have been a nurse or something. She could have studied for something like that and decide that I'm gonna do whatever I can to help other people in significant ways. But no, it's just like she works, gets almost married, and then leaves and gets married and all of that stuff. No substance to the book whatsoever because of this. Like, there's no comment on what this disaster did to people other than like, oh no, I lost my family. And I'm not saying this in terms of losing your family isn't that bad. I'm saying it in terms of the book's tone when describing this. I know that I would eat this up if I was 12 or 13. However, this book is not middle grade. It's YA, and it reads more as middle grade than YA, unfortunately. And that's like the best I can say about the writing. And the worst I can say about the writing is that it looks like an extended outline of a movie that you would dream of making as a middle schooler. And I'm saying this with all respect. I know this because I'm a writer and I wish to publish my books, but not now because both of my novels are just first drafts or in editing, and I know that they need more work done and they need time to marinate, because you can't say, oh my god, this is a story, and then the author writes it and then it's just like maybe one round of editing and then that's done. I just know they didn't read this enough, because again, like the types of writing that I mentioned, the instances where it's just like no, or like gorgeous, and I'm thinking like, this is a World War II book. This is not, if this was a coming of age in like early 2000s, it would make more sense, but it doesn't make much sense in this context. There's no real descriptions throughout the entire book. Again, as I said, it's just repetitions of the same things over and over and over. Like, it was September, but it was warm, but then it was like so warm that you would want the air to cool down. And I'm thinking like, this is such a setting that there's bombs everywhere, people are dying, things are happening, there's like so much stuff going on, and they could have done so much with the imagery, like maybe the dust outside and a bit of serenity inside. Describe more of the setting in terms of places and feelings, and how home feels different to the outside, and how the tube feels different to the shelters inside the homes. But there's none of that. There's absolutely none of that. It's just like, again, as I said, I did this and then that happened and I was sad, and I couldn't feel my knees and I fell and I started sobbing. It's just like the most describing is when someone starts to sob. Outside of those two instances where I thought the writing was great, and if it continued that way throughout the entire book, I would have loved it so much more. it's very obvious that when Millie decided to write this book or plot this book was, I want to talk about the accident. And there's nothing of substance around it. Again, like, not even once do these people think about the poor others who are also dying. It's just like bad countries, we good, you bad, and it's just like no nuance whatsoever. It's just very black and very white, and there's no mixing it. And again, they had all the potential to show more. As I said, like, imagery could have been done so much better. Characters could have reflected the time period. Like Amelia, for example, the mayor is a woman, and I think that forcing these like modern things onto historical fiction is very, very odd. And the issue is that these modern ideas are put in the most modern way in that thing. Like, we don't see women struggling in a way that shows, yes, this is why these ideas are important. No, it's just like 2020's feminism in 1943. The mayor is a woman, and I don't think that's enough. Also thinking this is a war, and a world war at that. The romance was really like mediocre. Love triangle, but it's not really love triangle because she doesn't really like the other guy at all. Although it's been like forced down our throats, I don't see why Ray and Millie would like each other. Again, it's just like, oh wow, it's so fun to vibe with him. But like, why? Again, I don't know anything about Ray's character other than like, he brings sweets and he's super cute. Ray has no character in my opinion. Like, I don't know who he is as a person or as a character. It's just like Nellie's love interest. That's all the space that he takes. And when he died but didn't, I felt nothing. I was like, okay, yeah, that's too bad, I guess. But also, I was a bit confused, to be honest, when that happened, because I was thinking, what's their writing level? I think that like elementary writing would have this plot point of he died, but not really. Here he is again. So I was not sure what to expect. Also considering that the ghostwriter has like 19 books or something. But yeah, like, I don't know who Ray is as a person. I don't know who Billy is as a person, other than the fact that they like Nellie and that Billy has asthma and that Ray is American. And all we know about Nellie is that she has no interests, no ideas about anything other than being a stubborn-ish but not really person who is crazy but not really. She's not like other girls. She's so much different. And she's so super smart, but we don't see that in the book. She's so super selfless, but we don't see that in the book. The most selfless I think that she gets is thinking that people shouldn't have died. And that's a bit like, And again, like, there's no point to this book in terms of, I am the reader, right? And I read this book, but what should I take away from it? Like, yes, the accident happened, but what should I think about? It's just nothing. There's pure old nothing. So in the end of the book, we go back to 1993, and we realize that Nellie and Ray got married. They had 3 children, if I'm not wrong. But then Ray died like a few years ago from cancer or something like that. And Nellie keeps saying like, thank you, Billy, for giving us this life together. It was such a happy life. And again, it's so dry. It's just like, thank you, Billy, for giving us this life. It was so fun. And Billy says like, no problem, bestie. And we realize that Billy got married to Amelia, and they had children too, I think. And we realized then that they all got together for the memorial of the accidents. Since it's been 50 years. While I was reading the entire book, I was thinking, your only point here is to make a movie out of this, isn't it? Because it is, and it's so obvious. There's no soul to this book whatsoever. It's just wasted words. And again, when it comes to the words, it feels as though the author had very limited amount of words and she couldn't go outside of that like limit. So she was reusing so many words, like jutted her chin forward and cruel and scapegoat, like reusing these words over and over again. It's too much repetition and just not working at all. Considering Millie's work in this book, it feels like she was the producer and Kathleen McGirl was the actual writer. So now that we have established that the book is completely needless and pointless, I think Millie handled this super well when it comes to not hiding the fact that there was a ghostwriter. It still feels very disingenuous when I think of the cover, where it's just like 90 steps and then Millie Bobby Brown, and the author name being bigger than the title. And when you open the book, it just says like Millie Bobby Brown again, but then in like parentheses or something, or in italics something, it says with Kathleen McGirl. And I think she could have had more space, because it's a bit selfish, I think, to just say like, I wrote this book, but then I didn't write it at all. The process was that she just gave ideas, and then it was a ghostwriter who wrote all the drafts. The issue when it comes to reviewing is that I don't know how I should criticize this book, because it is Millie's story, but it isn't, because writing is such a huge part of a book, a novel. Descriptions and like point of view and narration is so important and so crucial to a novel, and how it conveys a point. Like, how much am I supposed to judge Kathleen for writing it this way when Millie was pretty much the boss when it comes to what gets written in the book? Maybe she read it and said like, this is good and I want it this way. So how am I going to criticize Kathleen for writing it in a way that the producer wanted her to write? In the end, ghostwriting is a deal, and it's not like a stolen manuscript or anything. She knew what she was going into. She knew that her name wouldn't be on the cover or anything. But it's still like a bit tasteless when it comes to the like presentation of the book and everything. The fact that Millie's name is bigger than the title, it just shows the point of the book. The point of the book is just to sell her name, not the book, not the plot. It's just Millie Bobby Brown, and people are buying it because it's Millie Bobby Brown. And I think this is like a quick cash grab before making this into a movie produced by and starring Millie Bobby Brown. Publishers would obviously never skip celebrity books, because they are one of the biggest things that bring in money, especially as debut novels. I don't have the audience that Millie has, so even if my book is 10 times better, I will never reach the amount of sales that Millie is reaching, because I don't have the name and the fame for that. But also the money that it's bringing, it's also helping new authors get published, because since they get the money from that side, they can actually use it for new authors. But yes, that was pretty much it. I do not have any more thoughts about it. I think there is a movie coming out already planned, and I just hope there's a little bit more nuance to the story in the movie than the book. And I'm pretty sure that the movie will be much better, because again, the book reads as like stage directions. It's just like Millie moves that way, Nellie moves that way, and then this happens, and then that happens, and this person enters the stage, this person leaves the stage, all of these kind of things. So especially with a big budget that I'm sure Millie can get, it will be a successful movie and much better than the book itself. I'm not sure, but my final rating for the book would be 1.5 or 2 stars out of 5. Is it low? Yes, but I don't think it deserves more. I did not enjoy it one bit. The writing was super bad. Characters are super dull and like cardboard cutouts. So let me know if you have read the book and what you thought about it, and how you feel about celebrity books, especially in fiction. Thank you for watching. I hope that you did enjoy this, and if you did, please, please, please let me know, and let me know if I should do more of these.